The skyline of Chicago shimmered under the morning sun, its towering buildings piercing a sky brushed with the soft hues of gold and blue. On the 50th floor of the Sutton Tower, where glass reflected power and every surface gleamed with curated precision, Daniel Everett, CEO of Everett Holdings, stood before a window that overlooked the world he had conquered. Everything he touched turned to gold: tech startups, real estate, medical ventures. His name echoed across boardrooms and headlines alike. But what the media didn't know, what even his closest allies failed to see, was the cold void he carried within, a cost of the choices he'd made, the people he'd left behind. He glanced at his watch. 9:26 a.m. In exactly 4 minutes, he would meet the final candidate for the newly created executive assistant role, a position that required discretion, resilience, and absolute loyalty. The last 3 candidates had impeccable resumes, but lacked the instinct he relied on. He needed someone who could keep up with the demands of his world and survive them. Downstairs, in the building's marble lobby, Claire Morgan checked a reflection in the polished elevator door. Her blouse, second-hand and slightly faded, had been pressed with care. Her navy skirt, the only one she owned that still fit, clung to her frame a little tighter than she preferred. Her nerves, however, were ironclad. She glanced down at Emma, her 6-year-old daughter, who clutched a small, well-worn backpack and a set of crayons in one hand. "I need you to be my quiet little artist today," Claire whispered, kneeling to eye level. "No running, no questions, no wandering off. Can you do that for me?" Emma nodded solemnly. "Yes, Mommy. I'll be invisible." The words pierced Claire's heart. Her daughter had learned early what it meant to adapt, to survive in a world that rarely made space for single mothers and their children. Her babysitter, Mrs. Carrington, had canceled last minute. Flew, again, leaving Claire with no choice but to bring Emma along. She had rescheduled this interview twice already. One more delay and she'd lose the chance entirely. Rent was overdue, and the utility company had already sent a final notice. This job could change everything. The elevator doors opened, revealing a sleek, minimalist lobby on the 50th floor. A receptionist with a flawless bun and an earpiece offered a tight-lipped smile. "Claire Morgan?" she asked, her gaze drifting pointedly toward Emma. "Yes," Claire replied, her chin lifted. "I apologize. My sitter canceled. My daughter will sit quietly in the lobby while I attend the interview." The woman hesitated, then tapped something into her tablet. "Mr. Everett doesn't typically allow exceptions. But one moment." She made a quick call, her voice low but firm. A pause. A nod. "His executive assistant will meet you shortly," she said. Claire exhaled slowly as she led Emma to a plush leather chair near a marble side table stacked with magazines. She pulled out a small sketchbook and set it on her daughter's lap. "Stay right here," she whispered. "Color quietly, okay?" Emma nodded again, already flipping to a blank page. Moments later, a tall woman with sharp eyes and a tighter smile approached. "Ms. Morgan? I'm Alice, Mr. Everett's assistant. He's ready for you." Claire stood, smoothed her skirt, and followed Alice down a long corridor. She passed framed photographs of company achievements, IPO launches, charity galas, global expansion headlines, and stopped before a pair of black glass doors that whispered open at Alice's touch. The office inside was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a panoramic view of the city. A minimalist desk made of glass and brushed steel stood in the center, behind which stood Daniel Everett himself. He turned as she entered, his gaze piercing, evaluating. "Ms. Morgan," he said without offering a handshake. "Please sit." Claire obeyed, perching on the edge of the leather chair across from him. "I'll be direct," he began, folding his hands on the desk. "This position is demanding. The hours are long. The stakes are high. I require discretion, loyalty, and absolute competence. Why do you believe you're the right fit?" Claire inhaled. "Because I've had to be all those things every day for the last 6 years, not for a company, but for survival. I've worked freelance marketing contracts, balanced 3 part-time jobs, and kept a home together on pennies. If I can manage chaos without a budget, I can manage yours with one." Daniel's eyebrow twitched upward. "Your resume shows a gap." I stepped back from full-time work to raise my daughter, Claire replied, her voice firm. Now that she's in school, I'm ready to re-enter the workforce. Most applicants don't bring their children to interviews. Claire's spine straightened. I had no choice. But I assure you, she's quiet and understands boundaries. Daniel leaned back slightly, his eyes narrowing. How old is your daughter? 6, Claire replied. He seemed to freeze. His gaze drifted, not toward her, but past her, toward something behind. The office door had opened. Claire turned sharply and saw Emma. The little girl stood in the doorway, sketchbook in hand. The receptionist behind her was breathless. I'm so sorry, Mr. Everett. She slipped away while I... But neither adult heard the rest, because Emma was staring at Daniel, her eyes wide, mouth slightly parted. Then she whispered one word. Daddy. The world stopped moving. Claire's heart slammed into her ribs as Emma ran across the room and wrapped her small arms around Daniel Everett's waist. I found you, she said, her voice full of certainty and wonder. Daniel's arms remained stiff at his sides. He looked down at the child clinging to him, her green eyes bright and familiar. Then up at Claire, his voice was ice. What the hell is this? The silence in the office was suffocating. Claire's lungs refused to expand. Her fingers clenched around the strap of her handbag as Emma stood there, arms wrapped tightly around Daniel Everett's waist. A man who now looked at her as if she were a stranger trespassing in his meticulously ordered world. Daniel's jaw was clenched, eyes cold. Claire, he said, his voice low and controlled in a way that suggested a storm barely contained. What game are you playing? It's not a game, she answered, her voice trembling but clear. And I didn't bring her here for this. She wasn't supposed to say that. He peeled Emma's arms from his waist and stepped back, careful, deliberate, as though the child touching him were a biohazard. Emma, confused, tilted her head. But you look just like the picture, she said innocently. Mommy has a photo of you in her drawer. Claire winced. Daniel turned to Alice, who still stood stunned in the doorway. Take the child out. Emma blinked. But now... His voice cut through the air like a blade. Alice moved quickly, scooping Emma up with unexpected gentleness. The little girl looked over her shoulder, eyes wide with confusion, but didn't cry. The door closed. Now there were only two. You owe me an explanation, he said. No anger yet, just steel. Claire exhaled slowly, her mind racing. I wasn't going to tell you like this. Honestly, I wasn't going to tell you at all. And yet here we are. He folded his arms. You owe me more than that. Claire closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, the weight of 6 years of silence sat heavy in her throat. We met 7 years ago in San Francisco. You were speaking at a tech summit. I was a temp at the venue, running marketing logistics. We talked for 15 minutes before the after party. I remember, he said, coolly. I didn't expect anything to come of it. But then she looked away. We spent one night together. That was it. He was still now, watching her like she was both bomb and detonator. I didn't realize I was pregnant until 3 weeks later, she continued. I tried calling the number you gave me. It was out of service. I Googled you, but by then you disappeared into press. You weren't Daniel Everett. You were Everett Holdings. You became untouchable overnight. I didn't give you a fake number. I didn't say you did. I said it didn't work. He didn't reply, but she could see gears turning behind his eyes. The math, the possibility. And instead of contacting my office or writing a damn letter, would your office have responded to a single mother with no proof? That struck a nerve. His face twitched. I had no money, no access. I was terrified, and I made a choice to do it on my own. I've never asked you for anything. I wasn't planning to. He paced slowly behind the desk now. So what changed? Nothing. I needed this job. I brought her because my babysitter canceled. She saw your picture on the company website, recognized you, and... Claire stopped. Her voice cracked. I didn't plan this. I swear. Daniel stopped moving. So you're telling me that little girl is mine. Claire didn't flinch. Her name is Emma. And yes, she's your daughter. Silence. Seconds passed. Then minutes. The world outside the windows continued, the hum of traffic, the chatter of life. But inside the office, it was frozen. Daniel finally spoke, and his voice was quieter than she expected. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I didn't think you'd care. He blinked at that. A flicker of something. Pain? Crossed his face. I see. No, you don't. You think money fixes everything. But I wasn't looking for a check. I was protecting her. From me? His voice rose slightly. From disappointment, Claire replied, her tone sharp. From rejection. From being made to feel small or like a burden. I didn't want her growing up wondering why her father never called. Daniel stepped back, leaning against the edge of the glass desk, staring at the floor. I'm not that man, he said quietly. Then prove it. Their eyes locked. The door opened again. Alice returned, holding Emma's hand. I'm sorry, she said. She was worried. Emma looked up at Claire, then at Daniel. Did I do something wrong? Claire crouched beside her. No, sweetheart. You just surprised him. That's all. Emma turned to Daniel. You don't have to be my daddy if you don't want to. His breath caught. I already have a dog named Mr. Pickles, she added earnestly. So it's okay. Daniel stared at the child, her green eyes, her stubborn chin, and something shifted in his face, like a glacier cracking after years of stillness. Emma, he said slowly, would you like a snack? She brightened. Can I have juice? We have orange. Okay, she said, beaming. Claire blinked in shock as Daniel picked up his phone and pressed a button. Natalie, bring orange juice and graham crackers to my office. 2 sets. He looked at Emma again. Would you like to draw while I finish talking to your mom? She nodded solemnly. I brought my crayons. She walked to the couch, settled into the corner like she belonged there, and began coloring with intense focus. Claire sat silently as Daniel returned to his desk. So, he said, what happens next? Claire hesitated. That depends on you. I want a paternity test. Of course. And after that, I want time to figure out what this means. For all of us. Claire nodded. That's fair. His voice dropped. I don't know how to do this. She looked at him, and for the first time saw something raw in his face. Something unsure. Something human. Neither did I, she said gently. But we learn. That evening, Claire sat in a cab holding Emma's hand while the city blurred past. Do you think he'll like my drawing? Emma asked. I think he already does, Claire whispered. Her phone buzzed. A text. Unknown number. I'd like to meet her again. No lawyers. No PR. Just us. Daniel. Claire stared at the message. For the first time in 6 years, the man who had unknowingly helped create a life was stepping toward it. And somehow, she was afraid. Not anymore. Daniel Everett didn't sleep that night. He sat in his penthouse office overlooking the city, the lights below flickering like tiny declarations of life. On his desk were 2 things he couldn't take his eyes off: a printed photo of Emma, scanned from Claire's social media, and a paternity test appointment confirmation his lawyer had arranged for the following morning. He had built billion-dollar deals, negotiated contracts across 3 continents, and led teams of the most brilliant minds in technology and finance. But nothing had ever made him feel as uncertain as the image of that little girl looking up at him and calling him Daddy. He poured himself a drink and leaned back. Was she his? There was no logic in doubt. The timeline matched. The eyes matched. The photograph Claire had mentioned. He remembered the woman, vaguely. Her smile. A whirlwind night in San Francisco before a major keynote. He hadn't thought of it since. But that child, she wasn't vague. She was vivid, and her face haunted him. The next morning, Daniel stood outside a sleek, private medical facility, waiting. His driver opened the door just as Claire's rideshare arrived. Emma bounced out, dressed in a yellow sundress and a sparkly unicorn backpack. "Hi," she waved, unbothered by the awkwardness between the adults. "This place is fancy." Daniel forced a smile. "Good morning, Emma." Claire looked more guarded. "She thinks it's a science experiment." Daniel nodded. "It is, in a way." Inside, the technician was kind and patient. Emma sat quietly while they swabbed her mouth, then giggled when Daniel had to open his own mouth for the same test. "You have big teeth," she informed him. Claire stifled a laugh. After the procedure, Emma asked, "Do I get a sticker?" The technician handed her a sheet. She chose a purple astronaut. As they walked outside, Daniel hesitated. "Would you both join me for lunch?" Claire looked surprised. "Today?" He nodded. "It's not business. I'd like to spend time with her. And you, if that's all right." She considered him for a moment, then nodded. "All right, one lunch." They went to a quiet restaurant near the lakefront, one of Daniel's usual spots, the kind where the staff knew not to ask questions and privacy was prized above all else. Emma ordered mac and cheese with apple juice. Daniel ordered the same. Claire raised an eyebrow. "Really?" He shrugged. "When in Rome." Emma chatted the entire time. About school, about her favorite teacher, about the science project she'd made with pasta noodles and glue. Daniel listened, fascinated. Her mind was sharp, curious, filled with questions. At one point, she leaned forward. "Do you like dogs?" "I do." "Then you'll like Mr. Pickles. He's very wrinkly." "Is he a pug?" Emma gasped. "How did you know?" Daniel smiled. "Lucky guess." Claire sipped her water, watching the exchange with a complex mix of emotions. She wasn't ready to name them yet. After lunch, Daniel walked them to a waiting car. Claire hesitated before letting go of Emma's hand. "She's had a good day." Claire said quietly, "Thank you. I didn't do anything special." Claire looked at him. To her, just showing up is special. Daniel nodded slowly. "I'll wait for the test results. But regardless, I'd like to keep seeing her, if you'll allow it." Claire studied his face. She trusts easily, but she also remembers who breaks that trust. "I'm not planning to disappear." "Good," Claire said, "because she'll be looking for you." The next day, Daniel received the results in a sealed envelope hand-delivered by his legal team. He opened it in his office, alone. 99.97% probability of paternity. He reread the number 5 times. She was his. There was no doubt. He sat back, heart pounding, fingers shaking. Then, for reasons he couldn't explain, he laughed. Not from joy, from disbelief, from the sheer absurdity of his life unraveling in such an unexpected, irreversible way. He had a daughter. His assistant, Natalie, poked her head in minutes later. "Mr. Everett, Ms. Blackwell is on line 1. She says it's urgent." He sighed. "Victoria." He picked up the phone. "Yes." Her voice was sharp. "Is it true?" Daniel didn't ask what she meant. "Yes. I got the test back." "Daniel." She exhaled like a warning. "This complicates everything." "I'm aware. What are you going to do?" He looked out the window, watching a small bird land on the ledge. "I'm going to be her father." That night, Daniel showed up at Claire's door. She answered with Emma behind her, already in pajamas, a bedtime book in hand. Daniel knelt down. "Hey!" Emma smiled sleepily. "Did the science experiment work?" "It did," he said. "It told me something very important." "What?" "That I'm your dad." Emma beamed. "I knew it." She threw her arms around him again, and this time, Daniel didn't hesitate. He hugged her back. Claire stepped aside, letting him into their tiny... The buzz of Daniel Everett's phone pulled him from sleep at 5:38 a.m. He blinked at the screen. Board meeting, 7:30 a.m., urgent. No subject line. No explanation. Just urgency. He dressed in silence, his mind racing. The night before, he had stayed late at Claire's apartment, reading Emma a bedtime story, twice, because she said you do the voices better, helping her count stars a window, and quietly offering Claire a check for rent, which she flatly declined. Now, his daughter was asleep in a neighborhood with a broken front gate and leaking plumbing, while his world, the one built on precision, reputation, and pristine control, prepared to respond, and not kindly. At 7:31 a.m., the boardroom at Everett Holdings was full. 11 members, polished suits, caffeinated silence, and Victoria Blackwell, radiant in her cream blazer, seated beside her father, Richard Blackwell, a major investor. Daniel took his seat at the head of the table. "We'll begin," said Bernard Choi, the lead financial officer. "There's concern that your personal matters are impacting our image." Daniel's jaw clenched. "You mean the fact that I have a daughter?" "We mean the fact that the media believes this child appeared days before the WaveTech merger," Bernard replied. "They're suggesting scandal, manipulation, hidden errors." Daniel glanced toward Victoria, who looked back without blinking. "I've addressed this," he said. "Not to our shareholders," countered Olivia Tran, head of global strategy. "There's confusion and speculation. That breeds instability." "I prepared a statement," Victoria said suddenly. She pulled a folder from her bag. "If Daniel agrees, we release it jointly. It confirms the child is biologically his, acknowledges her existence respectfully, and outlines that our wedding remains on track." Daniel stiffened. She was already speaking for both of them. "What it doesn't mention," Victoria continued, "is the mother. No need to give unnecessary attention to Miss Morgan." "She's the child's guardian," Daniel said. "And what's her angle exactly?" Richard Blackwell leaned forward. "What woman keeps a billionaire's child secret for 6 years, then shows up at his company?" "She didn't show up," Daniel replied evenly. "She applied for a job, and she's not asking for anything." Richard scoffed. "They always are." Daniel pushed the statement away. "I won't be signing that." "Daniel," Victoria warned softly, "let's not be naive. You think this won't affect investor confidence." He stood. "What I think is that my daughter isn't a liability to be spun. She's a 6-year-old girl who deserves better than being erased from a press release." Silence. "Meeting adjourned," he said, and walked out. Later that day, Claire received a text. "Lunch? You choose a place. D." She stared at it from behind the counter of the local grocery, where she'd picked up a part-time shift. She was still wearing her apron. Her phone buzzed again. "I promise I won't wear a suit." She laughed and texted back. "There's a taco truck near Lincoln Park. Emma loves the carnitas." They met an hour later. Daniel, shockingly, was in jeans and a black sweater. He looked almost normal, almost approachable, except for the part where he paid for their tacos in cash, like he was hiding from someone. Emma climbed into his lap without hesitation and began eating her taco sideways. "I see table manners are evolving," Daniel said dryly. Claire smiled. "It's called freedom of expression." "Fascinating," he replied, brushing shredded lettuce from his shoulder. Emma finished her taco and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I drew you this." It was a picture of him, her, and Claire holding hands in front of a huge building labeled Everett. Above them were stars, a sun wearing sunglasses, and a speech bubble from her cartoon self saying, "I found my daddy." Daniel stared at it. "Are you okay?" Claire asked. He didn't answer immediately, then nodded. "Yeah, I just didn't expect to be in her world like this. And now I can't imagine not being in it." That evening, back in his penthouse, Daniel sat across from Victoria. "You didn't mention we were issuing statements," he said. "You didn't mention you were skipping another planning meeting. I'm spending time with my daughter." Victoria's lips thinned. "We're getting married in 8 weeks. The guest list isn't finalized. The venue has questions. The caterer can wait." She stared at him. "What exactly is going on, Daniel?" she asked finally. "Are we still us?" He didn't answer, and that was her answer. She stood, silent, picked up her purse, and left without another word. 3 days later, Daniel showed up at Claire's apartment at 4:15 p.m. Unannounced, Ty Askew phoned for the Everett family estate in Greenwich, Connecticut. Still like a monument to a version of the world Daniel had long since learned to navigate, and in many ways outgrow. White stone, black shutters, 3 generations of lineage, tradition, and control etched into every molding, every polished surface. The kind of home where shoes clicked against floors, voices stayed low, and people never, ever discussed feelings. Daniel had barely rung the bell before the door opened. His mother, Margaret Everett, stood tall and composed, dressed in a silk blouse the color of bone and pearls older than most companies. Her gaze swept over him with surgical precision. "Daniel," she said, "it's early for a visit." "We need to talk," he replied. She led him to the drawing room, where tea already waited. She always knew to prepare for control, even when she wasn't in it. "I assume you come about the child." Daniel didn't sit. "Her name is Emma." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "Yes." The press seemed quite taken with her. Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Did you leak the story?" "Of course not," she said smoothly. "But I didn't deny it either. You're a public figure. Secrets never stay secrets." "She's not a scandal, Mother." "I never said she was," Margaret replied. "But the child complicates things." "For who?" "For you. For your fiancé. For the legacy you're meant to protect." Daniel finally Saturday. "I used to think legacy meant building something that lasts. Now I realize it means making sure the people you love don't get lost in what you build." Margaret paused, teacup halfway to her lips. "So she is yours." He nodded, confirmed by DNA, "and by everything else I feel when I look at her." "I see." "No," he said, "you don't. You see a problem. I see a daughter." A pause. "And a mother?" she asked carefully. "Claire is strong, honest, and completely uninterested in anything I can give her, which makes her dangerous." Daniel's laugh was humorless. "No, it makes her rare." Margaret set her cup down with a quiet clink. "You're thinking of leaving Victoria." "I'm not thinking. I'm deciding." "You're aware what that will cost you?" "Yes." "Board confidence, investor faith, political allies, the Blackwells. Can all go to hell if they believe this child diminishes me." Margaret stared at him. Her eyes softened just slightly for the first time in years. "She reminds me of you," she said quietly. "Emma?" "Yes," Margaret replied. "When you were 6, you refused to wear your bow tie at your grandfather's retirement gala. You said it felt like a leash for your neck." Daniel blinked. "I spanked you that night," Margaret said. "Your father thought I should have applauded you. He always admired your defiance." Daniel looked away. "You never told me that." "There's a lot I never told you. But I know what it means to raise a child alone, Daniel." His head snapped up. Margaret folded her hands. "Your father died when you were 10, but he'd been absent long before that. The only difference between me and Claire Morgan is that she still hopes her daughter won't resent her for the sacrifices." Silence fell, broken only by the ticking of the antique clock above the fireplace. "What do you think I should do?" Daniel asked finally. Margaret's answer surprised him. "Whatever allows you to look her in the eye, 10 years from now, and say you never made her feel like she was second." Meanwhile, across the city, Claire stood in the middle of a quiet storm. Her phone buzzed with media requests, emails, speculation, and now, thanks to a well-placed leak from Victoria's team, anonymous hate mail. "Gold digger. Trap baby. How much did he pay you?" She deleted every one, but each burned its own scar. She'd survived eviction notices, ramen dinners, hospital bills, and loneliness that ached like bone, but this threatened the one thing she protected above all, Emma's innocence. She turned off her phone and stepped into the living room. Emma was building a spaceship out of cereal boxes. "Do you think Daddy would ride this?" she asked, holding up a paper tube telescope. Claire smiled faintly. "Maybe, but only if you're the captain." "I am," Emma declared. "Captain Emma, Queen of Saturn." Claire knelt. "Can I be your co-pilot?" Emma wrapped her in a sudden hug. "You're already everything." And just like that, the hate mail vanished. That night, Daniel didn't go to a board dinner. He didn't call Victoria. Instead, He showed up at Claire's apartment with two surprises. One, a purple bike with glittery streamers and training wheels. Two, a key. "What's this?" Claire asked, holding it between two fingers. "It's to a 3-bedroom condo near Washington Park. Good school district. Safe. Private." Her face tightened. "I told you we're fine here." "You're not," he said gently. "You're surviving. And I'm not offering this as charity. I'm offering it because she's my daughter. And if I say no, I'll find another way." Claire folded her arms. "Why now? Why all this?" He looked at her, honest and open in a way she hadn't seen before. "Because I'm tired of living in a world that's perfect on paper and hollow in person. Because I'm a little girl who drew me a picture and called me her dad before I knew what that meant. And because I can't unsee what my life was missing." Claire's breath caught. "And us?" she asked. "What are we, Daniel?" He stepped closer. "I don't know yet," he whispered. "But I know what we're not. We're not pretend. We're not temporary. And I don't want this to be over before it begins." She didn't speak, but she didn't look away. Later that week, Daniel hosted Emma at his penthouse for the first time. She touched everything, asked questions, opened drawers, left smudges on glass. And Daniel let her. He found himself laughing genuinely. For the first time in years, they ate ice cream at 10 p.m., watched cartoons he didn't understand. And when she fell asleep curled up on his couch, Daniel sat beside her for hours, just watching, as if memorizing what love, real uncomplicated love, looked like. Across town, Victoria stared out her apartment window, wine untouched, phone off. Her wedding planner had called 3 times. Her father had emailed 6 articles about damage control. But all she could think about was Daniel's face when he talked about Emma. He had never looked at her that way, and she finally understood why. Because Victoria had always loved the idea of the man. But Claire Morgan had somehow found the man beneath the idea. And Victoria had no strategy to compete with that. Not anymore. The boardroom at Everett Holdings was abuzz with unspoken tension. Daniel stood at the head of the massive oval table, flanked by Olivia Tran and Bernard Choi. On the screen behind him glowed the words, Q3 Strategic Expansion, Adjusted Leadership Framework. He wasn't presenting numbers this time. He was presenting himself. "My daughter's name is Emma," Daniel began, voice calm but resolute. "She's 6 years old. Smart, kind, curious, and the best thing that's ever happened to me." Some board members shifted in their seats. 3 weeks ago, I found out she exists," he continued. "Since then, I've made decisions that reflect that discovery. I've missed dinners. I've skipped meetings. I've spent time learning what it means to be a father." He paused. "And I don't regret 1 second of it." A murmur spread. Bernard frowned slightly. Olivia remained stone-faced. "I've also made changes to the company's operating structure. Olivia Tran will oversee the Wave Tech merger directly. I'm stepping back from frontline involvement for the next 60 days to focus on personal matters." Silence. "Personal matters?" one of the European division reps asked dryly. "You mean parenting?" "I mean restructure my life," Daniel replied. Bernard cleared his throat. "Daniel, you built this company from a 2-man startup to a global force. But sudden disengagement." "Isn't disengagement," Daniel interrupted. "It's delegation, which is what good leadership looks like." He leaned forward. "For years, I've demanded sacrifice from everyone here. From my executives, my employees, myself. I believed relentless forward motion was the only metric that mattered." He looked down. "I was wrong." Olivia finally spoke. "Are you resigning?" Daniel looked up. "No, I'm rebalancing." Somewhere near the back, someone actually applauded. An hour later, in the hallway outside the boardroom, Victoria waited. Her cream-colored dress was flawless, her makeup subtle, her stance rigid. "I heard the announcement," she said coolly. Daniel straightened his cuffs. "Then you know where I stand." She nodded. "And where do we stand?" He paused. "You and I have always been convenient," he said. "Strategic. Polished. I loved you," she replied, voice suddenly trembling. "Even if you didn't love me the way I needed." "I believe that," Daniel said gently. "And I'm sorry." She inhaled sharply. "Is this about her?" "Claire, it's about me," he replied. "But yes, she helped me see who I could be." Victoria's mouth quivered for a moment before she spoke again. "I didn't leak the story," she said quietly. "But I didn't stop it either." "I know. I just didn't want to be forgotten." Daniel nodded slowly. "You won't be, but we're over." She held his gaze, then stepped back, nodded once, and walked away. It wasn't graceful, but it was honest. Across town, Claire sat on the floor of their new apartment, not fancy but safe and 5 minutes from Emma's new school, surrounded by boxes of children's books and a tiny desk from IKEA she hadn't figured out how to assemble yet. Emma, meanwhile, was busy drawing on the cardboard walls with glitter pens. "This is Daddy's chair," she announced, pointing to a stick figure throne she'd scribbled with pink ink. "It's a thinking chair." Claire smiled. "Does Daddy think a lot?" Emma nodded solemnly. "About space. And snacks." There was a knock at the door. Claire opened it to find Daniel holding takeout and a bag of tools. "You said the desk beat you," he said with a smirk. "For screws short and 2 curse words away from divorce," she replied. "We're not married." "Exactly." They sat on the floor while Emma narrated a stuffed animal soap opera in the background. Daniel tightened screws. Claire sorted instructions. The desk came together. So did something else. That night, after Emma had gone to bed, Daniel lingered. They stood on the balcony, city lights blinking beneath them. "You quit the merger," Claire said, watching his face. "I didn't quit. I handed it off." "And Victoria?" "We're done." Claire exhaled slowly. "You're really doing this." "I don't have to do anything," he said. "And I don't run anymore." She looked at him. "What if I'm not ready for your world?" He stepped closer. "Then we build a new one together." The next week, Daniel took Emma on their first official father-daughter outing. They went to the planetarium. He let her eat cotton candy before lunch, bought her a telescope, sat through the same astronomy show twice because the stars felt friendlier the second time. Later, in the lobby gift shop, Emma tugged his sleeve. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything. You think Mommy smiles more now?" Daniel blinked. "I think so. I think it's because of you," she said simply. He knelt. "I think it's because of us." Meanwhile, back at Ever Holdings, Bernard and Olivia reviewed the updated executive plan. "He's shifting," Bernard observed. "Not soft, just grounded." Olivia nodded. "I've seen worse transitions." "Do you think he'll last like this?" "Balance." She looked up. "Depends on what he's really building now." That evening, Daniel cooked dinner, burned the chicken, oversalted the salad, set off the smoke detector. Emma declared it the best meal ever. Claire laughed until her ribs hurt. Later, as Emma fell asleep on the couch with her teddy bear, Claire turned to Daniel. "You're not who I expected," she whispered. "I'm not who I was." A Tuesday morning in mid-October started with frost on the windows and headlines on the front page. Billionaire Daniel Everett's secret daughter sparks investor shakeup. Who was Claire Morgan, and why is she still in his life? From struggling mother to high society influence, the rise of Everett's unexpected family. Claire stared at the newspaper someone had left outside their apartment door, her coffee cooling in her hand. The photograph on the cover showed Daniel and Emma at the planetarium, her small hand tugging his sleeve, his eyes watching her with unmistakable tenderness. It should have been beautiful, but the headline turned it into ammunition. Her phone vibrated with notifications she didn't want to read. She was being pulled into a world she never asked for, and she was starting to feel like the entire city was watching. That same morning, Daniel arrived at the office to find Richard Blackwell waiting in his private conference room. The man hadn't bothered to announce himself, a luxury afforded only to those who own entire wings of the company. "You've embarrassed yourself," Richard said coldly, tossing a folder onto the table. "And now you're embarrassing all of us." Daniel didn't touch the folder. "Good morning, Richard." "I'm not here for pleasantries." "Then leave." Richard's eyes narrowed. I'm here because I've had 3 major clients call me directly to ask if Ever Holdings is being run by a man with a mistress and an illegitimate child. Daniel remained seated, calm. Claire is neither. Optics don't care. And neither do the Blackwells. You broke an engagement with my daughter. My daughter, Daniel. In favor of what? A single mother with no pedigree. And a daughter you didn't even know existed until last month. Emma is my daughter. That's all the pedigree she needs. Richard's lip curled. Your mother may tolerate this emotional detour, but I won't. I'm calling for an emergency board review of your leadership. Daniel nodded once. You're welcome to try. Richard stood, slow and deliberate. You got until the quarterly report next month. Clean this up, or walk away before you're pushed. He turned left and didn't look back. At home, Claire was fielding a different kind of threat. Her personal email had been hacked. Someone had taken private photos from her cloud storage and posted them to a gossip forum, including baby pictures of Emma, hospital records, even an old journal entry from a year after Emma was born. She hadn't even remembered writing it. A confessional full of doubt and raw exhaustion, where she'd wondered aloud if she was enough. And now strangers were dissecting her darkest thoughts for sport. She sat on the bathroom floor, phone shaking in her hand, heart twisting in her chest. She didn't even cry. She just broke quietly. Daniel called 20 minutes later. Claire? She said nothing. Claire? She whispered. They posted everything. Daniel didn't ask who. He didn't ask what. He simply said, I'm on my way. 10 minutes later, he was at her door. She didn't open it at first. But when she finally did, she was trembling. Daniel took one look at her and pulled her into his arms. I'm so sorry, he whispered. I should have protected you from this. You couldn't have known. I should have known they'd come for you. For her. He pulled back slightly, cupped her face in both hands. This ends now. No, it doesn't, she said hoarsely. This is your world, Daniel. This is how it works. Your enemies don't come at you. They come at whoever you love. His hands dropped, and that, somehow, hurt more than anything else. That night, Daniel met with Olivia Tran. They sat in his corner office long after sunset, city lights flickering like cold stars. I need to control the narrative, he said. Then you have to flip it, Olivia replied. Take away their power. Go public. Own it. Claire doesn't want the spotlight. Then protect her by stepping into it yourself. Daniel stared out the window. She's the best thing that's happened to me, he said softly. And so is Emma. Olivia looked at him. Then make them your legacy. 3 days later, Daniel appeared on national television. Not a press release. Not a statement. A live interview. The host leaned forward. Mr. Everett, you've never commented publicly on your personal life. Why now? Daniel looked straight into the camera. Because the world has turned a little girl into gossip. Because her mother has been harassed for loving me quietly. Because when I built Ever Holdings, I promised to stand by what matters. And nothing matters more than my family. The host paused. So you're confirming? I have a daughter, Daniel said. Her name is Emma. She's 6 years old. And she's the most extraordinary person I've ever met. He continued, voice calm and grounded. I didn't know she existed until recently. That was my loss. But I will spend the rest of my life making sure she knows I see her. I hear her, and The doorman at the Bellamy Grand greeted them with a nod so polished it might have been trained at Buckingham Palace. Claire adjusted her coat and glanced up at the 80-story glass tower that shimmered like a monument to the ultra-rich. She could see her reflection distorted across every floor, a woman who had spent most of her adult life blending into walls, now being ushered into the center of a world that had never been meant for her. Emma, of course, was unfazed. "This place is taller than the library and the planetarium put together," she announced, skipping through the revolving door. Daniel chuckled beside her. "The top floor is even higher than the Empire State Building's observation deck. I want to go to the top." "You will. It's where I live." Claire shot him a look. "Correction. Where you occasionally sleep when you're not running the known universe." He grinned. "That, too." They stepped into a private elevator lined with ebony wood and soft leather panels. A security scanner blinked green as Daniel's thumbprint registered. Claire exhaled. This doesn't even feel real. Daniel looked at her gently. It is. I just didn't realize how unreal everything felt before you two. The elevator opened directly into his penthouse. Emma gasped. Mommy, this is like a palace. The living room alone was larger than their entire old apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the space, giving a panoramic view of the Manhattan skyline. A grand piano sat near the balcony doors. A library nook curled beneath a floating staircase. The furniture was modern but inviting, velvet, soft leather, natural wood. Warmth in a place built for cold power. Daniel watched their reactions like someone holding his breath. Claire stepped forward slowly, fingers brushing the marble countertop, the plush navy sofa, the shelves filled with first editions and architectural models. Emma darted between rooms. Oh my gosh, there's a room just for shoes. That's the guest closet, Daniel said. Emma disappeared into what would be her room, a space Daniel had personally designed with help from the head of his interior team. It wasn't pink. It wasn't princess-themed. It was full of stars, science kits, planets, and soft, twinkling fairy lights. Claire followed Emma in, and something in her chest ached. Not from envy, but from the knowledge that someone had actually seen her child, really seen her, and wanted to make her feel safe. Daniel stood quietly in the doorway, unsure whether to step in or step back. Claire turned to him. You did this. He nodded. She's been through 4 apartments in 6 years. You just gave her a universe. Daniel didn't speak. His throat had closed. Later that night, after dinner, after books and laughter and marshmallow-top hot chocolate, Emma finally fell asleep, wrapped around a teddy bear in her new bed. Claire stood on the balcony, arms crossed against the cold. Daniel brought her a blanket and 2 cups of tea. I don't know how to thank you, she said. You don't have to. I mean it. You've given her more than I ever could. You gave her everything that mattered, he replied. I'm just catching up. She turned to face him. And what about me? He blinked. You gave her the universe. What are you giving me, Daniel? He took a breath. My name, my time, my world. If you want it. Claire laughed softly. I don't need your name. No, he said, stepping closer. But I want you to know you could have it if you wanted. Not because of status. Not because of obligation. Because I want this you for real. The air between them shifted. He leaned in, slowly, giving her every second to step away. She didn't. When their lips met, it wasn't fireworks. It was shelter, a promise wrapped in quiet thunder. The next morning, Daniel's world woke up, and so did its judgment. His publicist called at 7 a.m. sharp. Who's the woman in the bathrobe on your balcony, Daniel? She's the woman who belongs there. Then we have to talk. The New York Times is running a feature on you, with photos and sources, and a quote from your ex-fiancé's father. Daniel pinched the bridge of his nose. Tell them I'm available for one interview. But Claire's off limits, and so is Emma. That won't stop them. Then I'll make expensive. Claire spent the next week being followed by paparazzi, bloggers, tabloid freelancers. They snapped photos of her at the park with Emma, at the grocery store, walking into the foundation office where she'd started consulting part-time. The worst came Thursday. A gossip columnist ran a headline. The Cinderella Scam. Is Claire Morgan the ultimate social climber? They used an old photo of her from a volunteer fundraiser, her hair in a messy bun, baby food stain on her collar, and a caption that read, From food stamps to Fifth Avenue. Claire stared at it on her phone in Daniel's penthouse kitchen, tears brimming but not falling. Daniel took the phone, read the headline, and without a word, deleted the article, then placed his hand over hers. Do you want to leave? She shook her head. I want to be angry, but mostly, I'm tired. He pulled her into his arms. They don't see what I see. She whispered into his chest. Then tell me again, because today I feel invisible in the spotlight. That evening, Daniel called his private security firm, assigned someone to Claire and Emma. Discreet. Rotating schedule. No visible earpieces. Understood. He hung up and walked into Emma's room. She was drawing. "Hey, Captain Saturn," he said. "Hi, Daddy. What you working on?" "A ship." He looked at the sketch. It was a rocket, but instead of flames, it had flower petals. Instead of wings, it had outstretched hands. "Who's it for?" Emma smiled. "Us, so we can go somewhere quiet when the noise gets loud." Daniel swallowed a lump in his throat. "Good idea." At the next Ever Holdings quarterly celebration, Daniel made a surprising move. He brought Claire and Emma with him. No hidden exits. No private side doors. They walked through the main ballroom entrance, hand in hand. The room froze, then shifted. Some people smiled politely. Some whispered. Some watched like hawks circling. But Claire kept walking. Emma, dressed in a navy dress and sparkly shoes, waved at the musicians. Daniel never let go of their hands. Later, as they sat together near the back of the ballroom, Claire leaned over. "You realize your reputation will never be the same." Daniel looked at her. "I hope not." That night, as they stood in front of Daniel's floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city lights pulse below them, he said the one thing Claire had never thought she'd hear. "I'm not afraid anymore." "Of what?" she asked. "Of loving you in public." She took his hand, and this time she didn't look away. The envelope was cream-colored. No return address. Delivered by hand. Claire found it tucked into the gate's side panel at the new house Daniel had quietly purchased. A brownstone with ivy-covered brick, close to Emma's new school, but whirled away from the glare of Fifth Avenue. She opened at the kitchen island, while Emma colored quietly at the table. The letter inside was handwritten in deliberate cursive, the kind that came from nuns or private boarding schools. "Ms. Morgan, I believe you knew my daughter, Rebecca. I have recently returned to New York and learned of your adoption of her child. I request a meeting, privately, to discuss what was never discussed. Sincerely, Eleanor Jensen." Claire reread it twice. Emma hummed to herself as she shaded the wings of a paper butterfly. Claire's hands trembled. Rebecca's mother was alive. That night, Claire told Daniel, they were sitting on the couch, Emma asleep upstairs, the fireplace crackling between them. She handed him the letter. He read it, slowly, then folded it along the same creases, as if honoring its symmetry gave him time to think. "I didn't know Rebecca's mother was still alive," Claire said quietly. "I didn't either. Do you think this is about custody?" Daniel shook his head. If she wanted custody, she wouldn't have sent a letter. She'd have sent a lawyer. Claire nodded. Still, the air felt heavier than usual, like they were being pulled into a story that hadn't finished writing itself. They met Eleanor Jensen 3 days later. She chose a tea house in the West Village, quiet and nostalgic. The kind of place that hadn't changed in 30 years, where the walls were lined with faded pictures and the air always smelled like bergamot and secrets. Eleanor stood when they arrived. She was tall, poised, and impossibly elegant in a pale gray coat and cashmere gloves. Her silver hair was pulled into a low chignon. Her eyes, startling green, matched Emma's. "Ms. Morgan," she said, "and Mr. Everett." Claire extended her hand. "You knew?" Eleanor gave the faintest smile. "I had researchers." They sat. No tea was ordered. "I was in Geneva when Rebecca passed," Eleanor began. "She never told me she was pregnant. We hadn't spoken in years." Claire nodded. She was protective of her choices. Eleanor's lips pressed together. She was stubborn, headstrong, and allergic to legacy. She loved Emma. I'm sure she did. Daniel spoke for the first time. "Why reach out now?" Eleanor looked at him. "Because my daughter died 6 years ago. And 2 weeks ago, her face appeared again, in the eyes of a child standing beside you on national television." Silence stretched. "I had to see her," Eleanor said. Claire hesitated. "We've told Emma about Rebecca in age-appropriate ways. But she doesn't know your name." She wouldn't. Eleanor looked out the window. "When Rebecca turned 19, she told me she didn't want my money, my influence, or my expectations. She walked away. I let her. She found family in other places," Claire said. Eleanor turned back to her. "I believe that's true." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small photo. Rebecca at 5 years old, grinning from atop a carousel horse. "She looked like Emma," Claire whispered. She still does. Eleanor slid the photo toward Claire. I'm not here to disrupt your life, but I want to know my granddaughter. Claire studied the woman's face. Why now? Eleanor's voice cracked, just barely, because it's unbearable to have a ghost for a child and a stranger for a grandchild. That night, Claire and Daniel talked for hours. They didn't argue, but the tension was real. Do you trust her? Daniel asked. I don't know. What does your gut say? Claire looked up. My gut says she's mourning, and maybe trying to make peace. And if she's trying to claim something, then we fight. Daniel nodded. But, Claire continued, if she's sincere, maybe Emma deserves a connection to Rebecca's side of the world. A safe one. Daniel looked away. She's never had grandparents. She might like one. He exhaled. Let's go slow. Claire smiled. Have you met me? The first meeting between Emma and Eleanor was at the botanical garden. Eleanor arrived in a long coat, carrying a wrap book. Emma clung to Claire's side, curious but wary. You're very tall, Emma said finally. Eleanor smiled. You're very observant. They sat near the orchid exhibit. Eleanor gave Emma the book, an old copy of A Wrinkle in Time with hand-painted edges and a note on the inside. For the girl who carries stars in her eyes. From the woman who once loved her mother more than she knew how to say. Emma didn't understand all of it, but she hugged the book tight. The visits became weekly, always in public, always brief. Claire stayed close, Daniel closer. But slowly, Emma began to ask for Grandma Eleanor. The numbers were bad. Daniel stood in his corner office at Everett Holdings. The city stretched below him, the glass walls casting a distorted reflection of the man he had become. A father, a partner, a different kind of CEO. And now, potentially, a liability. He turned from the window as Olivia Tran, his most trusted lieutenant, entered the room, tablet in hand, her usual cool demeanor laced with unease. You've seen it? She asked. He nodded. The report sat on his desk. The West Edge deal, a multi-billion-dollar partnership that would have taken Everett Holdings into global AI development, was dead. The board of West Edge cited strategic incompatibility, but everyone knew what it really meant. Daniel Everett had become unpredictable, too human, too domesticated. In their world, that made him weak. They're calling it the father effect, Olivia said flatly. 3 major investors withdrew this morning. They think you've gone soft. Daniel exhaled, steady but quiet. Because I chose to be there for my daughter instead of flying to Zurich for a last-minute meeting? They don't care about the why, just the image. He paced, fists tight. I spent 15 years building this company. I gave it everything. And the moment I stopped sacrificing blood for margins, I'm considered unreliable. Yes, Olivia said bluntly, because they were never investing in the man, just a myth. Daniel looked at her. Then maybe it's time they learn the myth can bleed. Claire watched the news from the living room couch that evening. Emma was upstairs building a pillow fort. The anchor spoke in calm voices over dramatic music. Daniel Everett suffers major corporate blow after West Edge withdrawal. Sources claim his family situation may be impacting strategic judgment. Everett's sudden transformation from boardroom shark to doting father raises eyebrows. Claire turned off the TV. It wasn't just about Daniel anymore. It was about all of them. She heard the door unlock and stood to meet him. Daniel's face was unreadable. Come here, she said. He did. They stood in the kitchen, his arms around her, her head on his chest, not speaking, just breathing through the storm. I may have just lost everything I spent my life building, he whispered. Claire pulled back to look at him. No, you didn't. You're building something new now. He looked exhausted. What if that new thing is enough? It already is, she said. For her. For me. She placed his hand over her heart. Now let's make sure it's enough for you. That weekend, Daniel took Emma to the museum. They walked hand in hand through the dinosaur exhibits, the space wing, the gemstone vault. At lunch, she asked, Daddy, why are people mad at you on TV? He paused. Because I said no to something big. Why? Because you're bigger. She nodded. Okay. Then she smiled. I'll draw you a dragon when we get home, so you don't feel small. And just like that, the man who had once closed $400 million deals without flinching nearly cried into his grilled cheese. The board meeting on Monday was tense. Bernard Choi stood at the head of the table, clearing his throat with ceremonial disdain. As most of you know, he began, our West Edge acquisition has collapsed. The market is watching. Investors are watching. All eyes turn to Daniel. I'm watching, too, he said evenly. And what I see is a culture so addicted to optics, it can't recognize actual leadership. He stood, slow and deliberate. I didn't lose West Edge because I was distracted. I lost it because I said no to compromising integrity for short-term gain. I lost it because I wouldn't fly halfway around the world and miss my daughter's first school play. A pause. And if that's weakness, then I suggest we redefine strength. He turned to Bernard. If this board believes a CEO can't be human and effective, then you're welcome to find someone else. But I won't apologize for loving my family. Olivia stood beside him. You don't need to, she said. Then she placed a folder on the table. Here's a list of 6 alternate partnerships already in development, including 3 that align with our ethical innovation goals, which, by the way, is what we said we were about when we built this company. Silence. Then Bernard spoke. Perhaps it's time we remembered why we invested in you in the first place. The West Edge fallout continued for days. Claire was followed again. One reporter ambushed her outside Emma's school with a microphone. Ms. Morgan, how does it feel to be the woman who ruined Ever Holdings' greatest opportunity? Claire didn't respond. She didn't flinch. But inside, something cracked. Later that evening, Daniel found her sitting on the floor of the living room. Emma asleep upstairs, her eyes red. I can't do this again, she said softly. Not like this. You won't have to. I don't want her to grow up being told she cost you everything. Daniel knelt beside her. She didn't. You didn't. They're just scared. Because people who feel deeply terrify those who don't. Claire laughed. A choke sound. You're quoting Brené Brown now? I've evolved. She leaned against him, and for the first time since the story broke, she let herself cry. 2 weeks later, Ever Holdings announced a new initiative, the Emma Grant. Named quietly after his daughter, it was a $100 million fund for startups led by single parents, caregivers, and unconventional founders. The press, for once, praised it, not because it was flashy, but because it felt real. Claire read about it online before Daniel could tell her. She walked into his office. The ring sat in Daniel's coat pocket for 4 days before he dared take it out. It wasn't just any ring. It wasn't big. It wasn't flashy. It was simple gold with a constellation engraving inside the band. The one Emma had drawn on a napkin tonight. She learned stars could fall like snow. He hadn't bought it on impulse. He hadn't even planned to buy it that day. But he'd passed a little jeweler shop on 81st Street, the one where his parents bought their wedding bands, and something in the display window made him stop. Made him wonder what a vow could mean when you'd already lost so much and still dare to believe in more. Claire was humming when he walked into the house that Friday evening. Emma was on the floor surrounded by cardboard, glitter glue, and at least 6 empty juice boxes. We're building the Andromeda Embassy, she declared proudly, out of cereal boxes. Daniel asked, It's interstellar recycling. Claire looked up, her face glowing with laughter. We're training her well. Daniel watched them, heart full and spine slightly trembling. How did you propose to someone who had already built your world before you even knew you needed one? That night, after Emma had fallen asleep with glitter on her nose and star stickers in her hair, Daniel sat on the couch beside Claire, her head resting on his shoulder. You're quiet, she said. I'm thinking. About? He shifted. You. Claire sat up, instantly alert. Daniel. He pulled the small box from his pocket, opened it without ceremony, without speech, and held it out. Claire froze. I don't need a perfect answer, he said softly. I just need your real one. She didn't reach for the ring. She reached for his hand instead. Can I be honest? Always. I'm terrified. His brow furrowed. Of me? No. Of losing what we've built. Of changing the balance. We're happy, Daniel. What if putting a label on it breaks something? He nodded slowly, fingers brushing hers. Then we wait, as long as you want. Claire looked down at the ring, at the stars carved into it. It's beautiful, she whispered. So are you. They sat in silence for a long time, hearts beating in sync, the ring between them like a quiet promise still taking shape. The next morning, Claire woke to the smell of cinnamon rolls and the sound of Emma explaining orbital velocity to Daniel in the kitchen. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, heart warm. This was their life now. No ceremony, no grand pronouncements. Just space and love and patience. She didn't put the ring on, but she didn't give it back either. Later that week, they attended a fundraiser gala for the Carter Institute, a nonprofit supporting working single parents, an initiative Claire had helped advise. Daniel wore his usual tailored tuxedo. Claire wore a midnight blue dress that Emma called her galaxy gown. They entered the ballroom together. This time, the cameras weren't a threat. They were witnesses. Claire spoke on stage. Her speech was brief, unscripted, and utterly true. I used to think resilience meant doing everything alone. Now I know real strength is allowing yourself to be seen, to be helped, to build something not in spite of others, but with them. The room applauded. Daniel's hands ached to hold hers again. The next day, Claire received an unexpected email. Subject: request for interview. From Kara Grayson, NYT Sunday Magazine. Ms. Morgan, I've followed your story, not the tabloid version, but the real one. Your journey from single motherhood to co-leadership of one of New York's most prominent philanthropic projects is compelling and deserves to be told with dignity. Would you consider meeting for coffee to discuss a profile? Claire stared at the screen. She hadn't asked for a spotlight, but maybe, for once, it could illuminate more than just gossip. Maybe it could make space for truth. She said yes. Meanwhile, Daniel was facing his own ghosts. An old associate, Marcus Vale, a powerful VC investor and one-time mentor, requested a private meeting. They met at a rooftop lounge near Bryant Park. Marcus wasted no time. You're not the same man I backed 12 years ago. Daniel sipped his drink. I'd hope not. You've lost your edge. I've sharpened a different one. Marcus leaned in. This family stuff. Emma collapsed on a Tuesday afternoon. There was no warning, no fever, no complaints of pain. She was at school, walking back from art class, when her knees buckled and she fell hard on the hallway tiles. By the time Claire and Daniel reached the hospital, she was unconscious. Machines beeped. Nurses moved fast. Words blurred. Daniel had built companies, survived economic crashes, outmaneuvered billionaires. But nothing prepared him for the sight of his daughter, his Emma, lying still beneath fluorescent lights, her small hand swallowed by 4 tubes and wires. Claire was shaking. I don't understand, she whispered. Dr. Leung, the attending pediatric neurologist, looked grave. We're running tests, she said. It may be something metabolic, possibly genetic. Daniel stiffened. What does that mean? Dr. Leung met his eyes. It means we need both of your medical histories. Immediately. For the next 48 hours, the hospital became a new kind of universe. Claire never left Emma's side. Daniel barely slept. He read every chart, every test result, researching obscure syndromes and inherited disorders like he was preparing for the most important pitch of his life. On Thursday morning, the MRI results came in. Daniel and Claire sat in the consultation room, hands clasped. Dr. Leung entered with a folder and a shadow behind her eyes. It's not cancer, she began, but it is serious. Claire's breath caught. It's a mitochondrial disorder, the doctor continued. Specifically, a rare mutation affecting her cellular energy production. Daniel frowned. What does that mean for her life? Dr. Leung was honest. It means fatigue, sometimes muscle weakness. She'll need careful monitoring, nutritional therapy, and low-stress environments. The good news is we caught it early. The even better news, it's manageable. Claire closed her eyes, relief and terror warring within her. But, Dr. Leung added gently, it will change how she moves through the world. Daniel nodded slowly. Then we'll change with her. That night, Claire cried for the first time since the collapse. In the hallway outside Emma's room, Daniel wrapped his arms around her as she whispered through sobs. I thought we were done with fear. I thought we'd finally arrived somewhere safe. We have, Daniel said softly. We're just building a different path forward. She looked up at him, tears shining. She's so small. She's stronger than both of us. Claire smiled weakly. You used to be terrified of her. Daniel chuckled. I still am, but now it's because she holds my whole heart. They took Emma home 3 days later. The house became a different kind of space. Softer, slower, more intentional. Daniel cleared his schedule indefinitely. No meetings, no calls, no press. Just Emma. They created daily energy charts together, tracking how she felt and what made her tired. Claire adjusted her meal plans with a pediatric dietitian. Daniel installed air filters, blackout curtains, and even turned the guest room into a recovery den, complete with bean bags and galaxy lights. Emma took it all in with curiosity, not fear. Am I sick forever? She asked one night. No, Claire said gently. but your body is different, and that's okay. Like a space explorer who needs a special suit? Daniel nodded. Exactly. Emma beamed. Then I want mine to have glitter rockets. One afternoon, Daniel found Emma asleep in the recovery den, clutching her sketchbook. He opened it gently. Inside were drawings, hundreds of them, of spaceships, cities in the clouds, maps of imaginary planets. But on one page, she had drawn their family, Daniel, Claire, and herself, under a big banner that read, "The team that doesn't break." His hands trembled. The girl he hadn't even known a year ago had become the gravity anchoring his soul. Meanwhile, the world outside didn't stop. The Carter Institute sent flowers. Journalists requested updates. Investors from Daniel's tech firm grew restless. "People are asking why you've gone dark," his assistant messaged. "The board's getting nervous." Daniel replied with a single sentence. "My daughter's life is not a PR strategy." He didn't owe them an explanation, but he would give them a revolution. Just not yet. Weeks passed. Emma stabilized. Her energy was unpredictable but manageable. Some days she built entire solar systems out of clay. Other days, she needed to rest after brushing her teeth. Claire and Daniel learned how to read her signals. They became a team in ways deeper than romance, a unit built on instinct, patience, and fierce love. One evening, Daniel caught Claire watching him as he helped Emma into bed. She was smiling. "What?" he asked. Claire stepped closer. "I didn't think I could love you more. And then you became her anchor." He brushed hair from her face. "You're the one who taught me how." They kissed. It wasn't passionate. It was reverent, like a vow without words. One rainy Sunday, they visited the planetarium again. Emma curled between them in the dark auditorium, eyes wide as galaxies bloomed on the dome ceiling. Daniel whispered, "Remember when I didn't know how to talk to you?" Emma giggled. "You were like a robot with no kid software." He laughed. "But now you're upgraded. Like Dad 2.0. Claire whispered, "Best version yet." Daniel looked up at the stars above them, hand resting on his daughter's small shoulder. For the first time in his life, he felt infinite and enough. But peace has its limits. The following week, the hearing was set for Friday. Family court, downtown Manhattan, courtroom 4B. Daniel had faced Fortune 100 boards, SEC interrogations, global mergers with 11-figure risks. But nothing rattled him like sitting on a cold wooden bench beside Claire, holding her hand as her ex, Robert Hayes, walked into the courtroom like a man entitled by DNA and arrogance. He wore a fitted navy suit, too expensive for a man who claimed he'd been unemployed for years. His posture was that of someone who thought showing up erased years of silence. He nodded at Claire. She didn't look at him. Daniel's jaw clenched. Emma wasn't in court. Thank God. She was at home with Eleanor, who'd flown in the moment Claire called her. "I raised her," Claire whispered, as if needing to say it aloud. He left. He doesn't even know her middle name. Daniel gripped her hand tighter. He'll never take her. Their lawyer, Elizabeth Rowan, leaned in. "Remember, the judge isn't here to punish anyone. He's here to assess what's best for the child." Claire swallowed. "Then we tell the truth." Robert's attorney, a smirking man named Carl Briggs, opened with a clean, rehearsed statement. "My client acknowledges his absence in the early years of the child's life, due to a combination of mental health challenges and economic instability. However, he has since made a full recovery, is employed, and is committed to building a relationship with his daughter. A child deserves to know both her parents, Your Honor." Claire's hands were shaking. The judge, a stern woman in her early 60s named Justice Maren Halperin, turned to her. "Ms. Morgan, how would you like to respond?" Claire stood. "My daughter doesn't know this man. He left before she was born. He never asked about her, never supported her, never sent a card. Nothing." Briggs interjected. "Your Honor, that's a characterization." "Sit down, Mr. Briggs," Halperin snapped. "She's speaking." Claire continued, voice stronger. "Emma is not a concept. She's a child, one with routines and fears and a mitochondrial condition that requires trust, stability, and consistency. She has a father, one who showed up and stayed." She looked at Daniel. "Love is action. Blood is biology. She doesn't even know this man's name." The judge nodded. "Mr. Everett?" Daniel stood. "I didn't know Emma existed until a few months ago," he said. "But the moment I did, I dropped everything. My company, my image, my reputation. Because none of it mattered more than being her father." He paused. "Robert Hayes wants rights because he contributed DNA. I want them because I contribute love every single day. The courtroom was silent. Even Robert looked uncertain. After recess, the judge requested a closed-door mediation session. Just the three adults, Claire, Daniel, and Robert. No lawyers. No prepared statements. Just truth. The room was bare. A round table. A water pitcher. Robert was first to speak. I didn't come here to steal her. Claire crossed her arms. Then why are we here? I saw the article about Daniel, Robert said, and then I saw her face. Our daughters. She looked like me. Daniel laughed bitterly. You recognized her in a photo but never asked if she was real? I panicked when Claire told me she was pregnant, Robert said. I wasn't ready. I thought she'd be better off without me. You were right, Claire said coldly. But I kept tabs, he insisted. I knew she was safe. I knew you were raising her well. But when the spotlight came, when Daniel Everett suddenly entered the picture, I realized Emma might grow up thinking I didn't care. You didn't, Daniel said, voice low. I froze, Robert said, and now I'm trying to unfreeze. Claire stood up. You don't get to show up now, when she's 6 and already built a world. I just want to know her. Daniel turned to him. You want to know her? Start by knowing her name, her school, her allergies, her bedtime stories. Then maybe you can write her a letter. A safe, supervised, gentle letter. Robert looked down. It began with a phone call from a name Daniel hadn't heard in years. Senator Wallace Stratton. The man had once been Daniel's economics professor at Yale, later a mentor, then a distant acquaintance, as Daniel drifted into business, while Wallace ascended to Capitol Hill. Now he was calling at 7:45 a.m., just as Daniel finished slicing bananas into Emma's oatmeal. Daniel, came the familiar, gravelly voice. I need 10 minutes. Not as a senator, as a citizen who's run out of patience. Daniel stepped into the den, signaled to Claire with a shrug. Go ahead. Stratton didn't waste time. I'm stepping down at the end of this term. Health reasons. And the party needs someone with spine, reformist values, and a record of building from scratch. You're calling to offer a campaign? Not a campaign, Stratton said. A revolution. You've done the impossible in the private sector. You face scandal, emerge with integrity intact. You're a father now, a man people can relate to. We need you. Daniel went silent. Think about it, Stratton said and hung up. Claire didn't say anything when he told her. She just stared at him for a full 10 seconds, then turned off the stove. Politics, she said finally. Daniel nodded. I know. No, I mean, really? You? I hated it once. Still do in some ways. But there's something about the timing, about what's at stake. Claire folded her arms. Let me guess. Climate legislation, child health equity, education reform, tax code modernization. Yes, he admitted. And your name's already being whispered on the Hill? He nodded again. Claire leaned on the counter, her voice tight. And what about Emma? Daniel hesitated. That's why I'm not saying yes. Not yet. Emma was in bed that night when Claire sat beside Daniel on the patio. I'm scared, she said softly. He didn't pretend not to understand. You become something incredible this year, Claire continued. A real father, a present man. But this world you're considering, it's not kind. I know. They'll dig, Daniel. Into you, into me, into Emma, into Rebecca, even Eleanor. And it won't be fair. It'll be weaponized. Daniel was quiet for a long time. Then, what if I could help rewrite the rules? Claire turned toward him. You really believe that? He nodded. And I want to try, but not without you, and never without her. 2 weeks later, the first op-ed appeared. Daniel Everett, CEO, father, future senator. The Atlantic. The profile was thoughtful, balanced, glowing, even, but the comment section was brutal. He's another billionaire trying to play savior. Where was he when climate bills collapsed last year? Fatherhood doesn't equal statesmanship. Claire turned off her phone. I don't know if I can do this again, she admitted to Eleanor, who had stayed an extra week to help. Eleanor placed a hand over hers. Then don't do it for him. Do it with him. Or don't do it at all. Daniel waited a full month before he brought up again. They were walking with Emma through Central Park. Autumn leaves drifted like slow-motion memories. Emma wore a red coat and bounced between them, narrating her newest idea for a science museum that only allowed kids. I call it Tiny Galaxies, she said. Everything's scaled down, even the grown-ups. Daniel smiled. That's a good name, Claire said. but her smile didn't reach her eyes. That night, Daniel wrote a letter, not to a publication, not to a campaign manager, to Emma. He left it on Claire's desk. Emma, I don't know what the world will look like when you're 12 or 20 or 60, but I know I want to help shape it into a place where girls like you aren't just safe, they're powerful. A place where love matters more than legacy and character more than capital. I've been asked to run for Senate. It would mean speeches and travel, and attention we didn't ask for, but it might also mean impact. And I'll only do it if I know you're okay with it. I won't choose a country over you, but maybe I can help change the country for you. Claire read it. She cried. Then she slipped the ring he'd given her months ago onto her finger for the first time. The announcement, the campaign, ended the way it began, quietly. No fireworks, no stadiums. Just Daniel, Claire, and Emma sitting on the floor of their living room, surrounded by takeout boxes and unfolded laundry, watching the results come in on a muted TV screen. When the final count was confirmed, Claire's phone buzzed with messages. Emma fell asleep curled beside the couch, and Daniel sat still. Senator Everett, Claire whispered, her voice a mix of awe and exhaustion. He looked at her, expression unreadable. I don't know how to feel, he admitted. Then don't feel anything yet, she said, sliding his hand into hers. Just breathe. The morning after the victory, the world exploded. Cameras outside the building, phones buzzing without pause, emails from political advisors, floral arrangements from donors he hadn't met. Daniel ignored all of it. Instead, he made Emma pancakes shaped like stars. You're different now, she said between bites. He raised an eyebrow. How so? You're shinier. Claire laughed. You mean he's glowing? Emma nodded, but not like magic, more like important. Daniel leaned across the table. You're the only reason I matter. The first 100 days were chaos. Orientation in D.C., policy briefings, TV appearances, security protocols that made Emma uncomfortable. Claire left her consulting job to stabilize their new life. Not as a sacrifice, but as a shift. I'm still me, she told Daniel one night as they unpacked boxes in their new townhome near Capitol Hill. Just me with more logistics. She kept Emma's routine intact. School, doctor visits, space museum Saturdays. And Daniel, despite 16-hour days and a sea of bureaucracy, kept his promise. Dinner at home 3 nights a week. No calls after 8 p.m. Story time, always. Then came the bill, the Family Stability Act. Daniel had co-written it with 2 colleagues, one Republican, one independent. It focused on subsidized childcare, expanded parental leave, and a new healthcare rider for rare childhood illnesses. It was deeply personal and wildly unpopular with big pharmaceutical donors. Opposition swelled. Lobbyists flooded his office. Even allies asked him to scale it back. Daniel refused. They're not abstractions, he said during a committee hearing. They're real kids. My kid and yours. The bill passed the Senate by a single vote. Claire cried when she saw the news. Emma did a victory dance in her pajamas. Daniel sat alone in his office and reread the final draft, tracing the paragraph that bore Emma's name in its research footnotes. He had done something real. For her. For millions. Months passed. Seasons shifted. Daniel grew into the role. He remained an outsider in some circles, a reformist in others. But his approval ratings stayed high. People believed him. Not because he was perfect, but because he had once lost everything and chosen to begin again. He started a podcast called Start Over. Emma was the first guest. She talked about mitochondria, teddy bear doctors, and why some stars live shorter lives than others. Daniel asked, what do you want to be when